No, we've not.
Right. Okay, thank you. Well, welcome to tonight's meeting of standards and general purposes. It's a slightly different setup, so we're going to have to speak up because we are not in the council chamber and therefore haven't got amplified sound. But for those that are online, and there's one councillor and our external also are online, so we need to speak up for the purposes of the device in the middle of the room, which should pick up our voice. Councillor Manley, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Working. Thank you, Richard. It's working. Right. Do we have any apologies for absence? I had an apology from Councillor Page and has been substituted by Councillor McGrath. Councillor Manley has given apologies for not being on here, but she's online.
That's all I'm aware of.
And then that everyone else is here, I think, aren't they? Okay, that's good. Thank you. We have a few officers attending tonight, and they're not sitting behind us as they are in the council chamber, or behind you. I can see them always. So it might be worth just introducing ourselves so everyone knows before we start who they are. As I start off, I'm Councillor Mike Brunt, the chair of standards and general purposes. So if we go around the officers first and come back up this way.
Okay.
Hey, I'm Louise Rand. I'm the interim executive director for innovation and change, but I'm also the council's monitoring officer for the purpose of this.
I'm Margaret Cullington, I'm the head of internal audit.
And I'm Kevin Holland, I'm the head of the Ford Partnership.
Evening, I'm Roger Kershaw, I'm interim executive director for finance and digital.
Helen Martin, I'm interim deputy chief accountant.
Richard Seedhouse, Democratic Services Officer and clerk for this committee.
Caroline Charles, Ravensbury councillor.
Councillor Martin Wilson, Walsall councillor.
Michael Patterson, Cameron Hill.
Councillor Lakshmi Adwa for Collinsburg Board. Councillor Edith Macaulay, Lavender Fields Small.
Councillor Billy Hayes for Graydon.
I'm Councillor Victoria Wilson for Rains Park.
Councillor John Braithwaite for Abbey.
Simon McGrath, councillor for Wimbledon Town Centre in Dundonald.
Councillor John Oliver for West Barnes.
Thank you very much, everyone. I should have said I'm Abbey Ward as well. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest made? I think that silence has been no. Good, thank you. Moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated. It was quite a brief meeting last time because the one was moved on and then this one was put into the diary to deal with the accounts. So are they agreed in terms of accuracy?
Agreed.
Right. Is it everyone's wish that I sign the minutes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Right, item 4 on the agenda actually is not an item for the agenda now because it's that's to come in the future when we get to the external audit annual letter once the accounts have been completed. So we can move on to item 5, which is the
The planning for general purpose committee in March to agree an audit plan for this year. So this year, it's an update on the progress. We've been asked to complete additional work this year on grant claims that we've been asked to sign off. So I've documented those in point 3.8 of the report. The audit service is set up to provide 765 days. And at the end of October, we provided 444. So we're making good progress on the plan. And we have 23 audits due draft the final, which we documented in the table. This report gives details of the limited insurance reports. So we had 2 finalised at the time of writing this report. And I provided that in 3.4 monthly onwards. So one of the limited assurance reports this that we've covered we looked at the bank changes on payroll where people request updates on their bank changes. We found weaknesses on due diligence checks that were being undertaken, so that audit was provided with limited assurance. The recommendations have been put in place on that one. And then the 3.15 is on the children's placement commissioning, which we have one outstanding action, and that is to make sure that they're following the council's contract standing orders arrangements and making sure that we are properly procuring when we go out to services. So there's recommendations that are still in progress. So as I say, we've made good progress on the audits on the electrical systems, which are on 3.10 I've listed there. So at the moment we've got 4 final, 1 draft and 4 in progress. So we will be aiming to have those complete. The progress of the priority 1 actions, we do still have 10 outstanding that are previous to this financial year. We have chased officers on updates for these, and I've provided details of their updates in the appendix B. So though we've managed to clear some of those actions, we still have some that we are waiting for them to be completed. So it may be if the actions are still not cleared, it may be that there's an opportunity for officers to be invited from those services to come and explain in future time if they're still outstanding how they manage in the list. But, if anyone's got any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Has that happened before, that officers have been
Yes.
asked to come? So, and they know that's a consequence of not.
Yes, we do put that on the report with limited assurance that they may be asked to come to committee. And it's actually quite useful because then they can explain how they've taken those actions forward. I can only really explain the point at the time of the audit and then the comments that they said to me, but then it would send
They can give an update.
an update on that's this, so it's useful.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Just on that point, at what point does that sort of next stage kick in? Like, is there sort of a time period over which you haven't had it hasn't been resolved, so they then come to committee? Do we need to set that, for example, say there's some here from 2019, I think, that, would we say if within 6 months or, a year, there's been no resolution, then they come to committee? Is that helpful?
It depends on the audit. I would have thought some of these have because they've been to committee 3 times, I think. I think at this point it maybe would be worth
We need to recommend recommendation.
I mean, if something's come to the committee, I wonder what stage we should rather have the chief executive of the council here rather than the director, because at some point they will have to, it's their responsibility to make sure things are done rather than if the directors aren't able to do them.
Can I just clarify what was meant by committee? It's been reported here. It's not that the office is giving it. It means that it's been reported about here rather than something coming. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was wondering if we ought to invite the building control and PCI compliance people from March, but we could cancel it if they could.
Yeah, I think mine is a comment. I think it's good to see that Counterford, it's been taken, investigations has been taken seriously, because the main issue under the criminal justice system, the number 1 issue is fraud on the internet. So I'm delighted to see that that's been taken seriously.
So, any other questions? But it's been suggested that we have building control and PCI compliance. Yes, sorry, on this page. But we ask them to come. I think the PCI compliance, that's 5 months old, 8 months older. So that would be, yes. But, yeah, we can ask them to come. Thank you. They give an incentive there. It's 4 months now to finish it.
We would withdraw that if it's clear.
It is clear. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, okay.
Just a couple of other questions. On schools audits, would it, because obviously you provided a list and they did last time as well, which is the current ones. Is it possible to have the full list and where they are in the cycle, you know, when were they last audited? Because I know you said that the aim was 5 years, but then because of obviously COVID and things, there are some delays. It's just quite helpful, I think, to have that bigger picture look to see where we are. I just wondered if in like an appendix or something, we could just have that. It'd be really that.
Would you want to publicise the date that they will be having their audits? Or do you want to do it more like an Ofsted thing? So maybe just have a list of the schools that have been covered and the schools that haven't been.
Yeah, well, I
Rather
don't
than
know if you have a
timetable.
full card. Yeah, sort of.
I have a list of all the ones, when they were last audited and their assurance they got.
Yeah.
When they're due. I mean, I find here that schools are due, so I'm happy to find.
Because the strength of audit is you don't actually know when someone's going to come to look, I would think. Exactly.
Or is that?
Am I being too much of an auditor on my past?
I don't always, I would warning, we don't bring it on unless it's their focus then.
Right, okay.
But I think when I first come with the audit plan off and I'll say we're going to do a site tool, so I won't always name them, but mainly that might be because we're still working through which ones we're going to do. But on updates, I've started to list here, I've got to list it, but we haven't actually contacted yet, so.
Maybe by year.
Yeah, it's a good sense of the backlog and, you know, that the people on top of. And then just one more question around the children's placement commissioning. Just to get a better understanding of that. So these contracts, they've gone out to a third party, just understanding why that would be and how a sense of like how many children that impacts and sort of their level of vulnerability. It's just, you know, I couldn't quite ascertain how serious it was. And so
they've contacted them as spot purchases, so they've kind of, as each child is required a placement, they've made an arrangement with that provider, so they have some sort of choice. But because they've got a few there at the same place, they haven't actually then gone and looked at whether they need to get a contract in place. So it's just making sure that that's the agreements properly written up. And what the council do is they actually go through this London Commissioning Alliance, and it's slightly cheaper as well. And the ones where we found, when we did the audit, we found quite a large percentage of those outside of the arrangement. So they're paying more. There's also that going on. So it was, I can provide the figures of how many, but I haven't got that.
and why do they go outside? It's because they're
Well, so I think that's more a question for children and young people's
Okay,
schooling. So we're here to see what the policy or the process is.
okay,
followed,
sorry.
rather than what the policy
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm right in saying that. Yes,
Okay.
Okay. that's fine. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, okay. Thank you very much. So therefore, the purpose is to agree to an audit plan. What we have, the audit plan has already been agreed, but we're now agreeing that we're going to bring forward 2 report to departments to the next meeting. So that means you've got that. And yes, well, by year.
And
You guys, I think.
the list of schools outside of that.
Yes, that doesn't need to be in a committee report. I think.
Yeah,
Give it
great.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the broad update reporting. Acronyms. You were told it by Roger earlier on to challenge acronyms.
Regulation.
Right, thank you. That's good.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is the fraud updates follow or mirror the audit cycle. So it will be an interim update report on progress this year. It includes a bit more report. This committee didn't receive a report back in March, so it includes a little bit about the indicative plan of how this would be allocated if fraud was linear, and it's not, but there's a indicative plan, and that's at table 1 on page 21, where I look at past activity that are full referrals, any particular issues are raised in offices or issues that are highlighted by Margaret through audit work. Anything issues are raised at shared service board. What I do try to do is to maintain a sufficient resource held back for the proactive work rather than just all responsive investigations work. But that might have to be let go or conceded depending on the priority of the cases that comes through to us. The other things I've just like to draw members' attention to is probably the current performance, and that's on page 22 and then in table 3. Regrettably, our work, one of the key targets that I have on service hand is in terms of recovered property that impacts the general fund resources for temporary accommodation. We haven't had any so far this year. And our numbers for the previous 2 years have been down because of COVID, because there's been a reduction in the amount of court time and stay on the execution of warrants on recovering properties. But also this year there was a problem with the main social housing provider in the borough, where they didn't have the normal access to their citizen records. So we've had to temporarily sort of stop and reduce the work we normally do. And that's why in that same table, the bottom figure where it's only 40% of the resources applied at half-year mark. That's because we've had to withdraw, or we couldn't actually progress a lot of the housing work because of the records we needed weren't available. I'm happy to say that that situation is now resolved. In the past 3 weeks, we've been picking up in that area and working with colleagues in that main social housing provider. And we'll now have one sort of housing lead working with them. That office will be supported by the officer. So I hope that will be covered during the process.
That's good news for the tenants of that social housing provider as well, that they've got their system back.
Yes. And then in table 4, this is sort of outlines the flavour of the type of referrals we take on board. The one thing that I would point out to, and it does match the increasing numbers, is that second line on there in terms of housing applications that we've actually dealt with. We only record these, most of these have come out with National Fraud Initiative work. I'll only record that there's a live case and we record the case when actually closed down and the application was withdrawn through housing services. Later on in the report in dependency, you'll see that we've identified a lot more, but they haven't yet been cancelled or the applicants notified. There are working arrangements in place with the service where we've got 4 more batches of data. We've actually been running the 4 batches of data to allow the service, because of their limited capacity, to actually go through and remove these from the system. But all of those should be completed by the financial year end. And then moving on, I think it's paragraph 4.4. I apologise for the typo, but what I can say is that the work on National Fraud Initiative and the data sets that should be provided are common to all London boroughs. So the information there is correct, even if the main council report is wrong. I apologise for that. Outside of that, I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions? Report. That's well done.
Yes, on the housing applications withdrawn, you've had a sort of much more successful than your target.
Yes. So the National Fraud Initiative does some data matching with housing waiting lists against deceased persons, and also where applicants may be rehoused in other authorities. The data set isn't maybe as accurate as it should be, so we'll get a long return, but not an awful lot of input from us. But we do checks to find and confirm more. There's still a process that service have to go through to actually just remove them and contact the individuals.
Thank you.
So that is ongoing. Thank you.
So can I ask?
Yes.
Just to say that doesn't really sound like it's fraud. It sounds like it's clerical.
It's yes. I would sort of tend to agree it's that, but the problem is that there's the risk of fraud in there, so having an application live, shall we say, that isn't needed or isn't genuine, because as I said, some of these are people who have got housing elsewhere. If some of those individuals, if they're offered housing, their second social housing property, some of them might say yes, thank you very much to it. So yes, the fraud element is low. That's why I say the numbers are high, and our input to doing it isn't great for the numbers that are coming through. It is much more of a data cleansing exercise that we're doing.
So just to follow that up, if you're on the housing register, do you have to renew that from time to time, or does it just go on indefinitely until someone discovers you've moved?
You should, as an applicant, keep the authority updated of any changes in the situation, but not every applicant does so. I think the authority is always resources where people get near to a position where they might be being considered for an offer, their details are then checked again. So the risk there, say it's one on the GDPR and make sure the next sets are as accurate as possible. And the second one is that you may have people get close to that, say, nomination position, where might be others of greater need within the mix, but because their initial circumstances have changed, but they're assessed on that initial circumstances, being that we now need to do some extra checks. So there might be just some overlap there.
At what point do we, sorry, what point do we test whether the list is accurate, how close to the list before we go out and just do it?
I don't know, Margaret here, that'd be work for internal audit.
Yeah, well, that would be an audit thing, and it is actually going on the audit plan next year.
Right.
Housing, so we're going to have a test on that.
Right, see whether it's overstated or
Yeah.
and how accurate it is.
Exactly.
So when we'll see the outcome of that going through here.
Yeah.
The future.
It's possible, isn't it, that we talk about 9,500 people on the housing list. It may actually be much lower than that when you clean it.
Yes, there were some changes to the legislation that allowed, I think 3, 4, 5 years ago, local authorities were allowed to refine who they let set onto the onto a waiting list. Prior to that, you could apply to as many authorities or every authority up and down the country, provided you told the same story. But when that change came in, people then were who they could apply to was very much reduced. Some authorities did some excessive data cleansing work at that point in time. Some didn't.
So we'll get more next year. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. So we receive the reports and look forward to that work next year. We've ordered. Thank you. No decision made on that. So item 7. Do we just check that our external auditor is with us?
She is.
Yeah, I am. Good evening.
Answer my question.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We're really, tonight is your opportunity for the committee to hear from Liz Jackson from EY, who's the audit partner, external audit partner, who's been auditing our accounts. But just to set some context, our accounts have been prepared in accordance with the various accounting codes and practices that we are required to adopt and fulfill. And you will be able to see a copy of our draft accounts as they currently stand as part of your pack. And this is your opportunity to hear from our external auditors tonight on the findings that they've made in terms of the accounts. Just to sort of outline a bit of the process, the council's required to have our accounts ready, draft accounts ready for audit no later than the 31st of August 2022, which we did. And then there's a statutory deadline to publish our statement of accounts by the 30th of November. So this committee is the opportunity for you to scrutinise that. I won't take Liz's thunder, but there is a national issue around valuations of infrastructure assets, which is thwarting many councils in terms of that process, which I'll let Liz go into in some detail and you can quiz her on that. It's important to note that EY are still in the process of auditing the statement of accounts, so they should be fairly close to the end of that. And one final comment from me, that under the accounts and audit regulations, we are required to make our accounts available for public inspection, which we have done. And that's for anybody, member of the public or interested party to come and inspect. And during that process, we had no external formal inquiries about the accounts while they were open for public inspection. One final thank you from me. I'm pleased to note that we've got Namechi Sivayogan online and Helen Martin sitting next to him, who've been stalwarts in producing the accounts, and will happily answer any questions you have on them, should you have any. But my thanks to them for all the work that they've done in producing the set of accounts from that point of view. So I think it's your opportunity now, Chair, to hear from Liz Jackson.
Yes, and just in terms of process, then the outstanding elements of the audits would be. Will we get a report back to actually sign off? Will we get a letter?
Any change? If there are any changes to the accounts which are presented to you tonight, we will bring them back.
Right, together with the letter.
Together with the letter. Once the final process has been completed with infrastructure assets. But Liz will be able to update you on the progress of their audit.
Right, okay, thank you. Over to you, Liz.
Brilliant, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that loud enough for the room? Yep, brilliant. Thank you. Then if I start with the kind of the council's accounts, because we've got two separate reports on the agenda, the council and then obviously the pension funds accounts separately. So if I start with the council accounts, and yeah, as Roger said, our work is almost complete, which is obviously the good news for you all. The kind of the bad news, which I did allude to obviously at the last committee meeting, was around obviously the infrastructure assets, and that means that we will not be signing, or I will not be signing, by the 30th of November, because there is a national issue, which we've set out in the audit results report. Kind of, if I take you through the exec summary, we've set it out in the exec summary to say that we identified an additional significant risk from when we brought the audit plan to you, just to set out and say that there is a national issue that's occurred. It is around the accounting of infrastructure assets, which kind of your roads, bridges, things like that, which are obviously, there is expenditure over a number of years, going back a long time, probably before I've even started auditing. So from that perspective, there is not necessarily the records, and this is not a Merton Council issue, this is a national issue. So anyone that has infrastructure assets, it is impacting on the ability to sign by the 30th of November. And that's because DLUC and SIPFA, who obviously produce the code on which you prepare your financial statements, and obviously I audit against, they are currently looking at the guidance to get what we call a statutory override. And that's effectively will give auditors and councils a bit of a get out of jail free card as such, to say you don't have all the records in place that you need to, because actually that level of detail is not on your asset register. And then they will make a point in time and say, as of this point in time, which we're expecting to be for the 21-22 accounts, anything before that, we just say we rely on the opening balances, and therefore then we can audit the year-end balance, which then we can audit the movement. And we've done lots of that work with the council already. So when DLUC and SIPFA do prepare their guidance, which we're expecting imminently, and we've been told before Christmas, we'll then be able to make sure we've done everything we need to do to meet that guidance, and then we can issue the audit report. It isn't anything that Merton have done wrong as such, and it's nothing from an audit perspective that we've done wrong over the years. It is just one of the other audit firms have identified this issue in their balances, to say that actually, do you have a breakdown of every time you've kind of replaced part of a road? Do you have then the records that stripped out the cost of the road that was already there to replace it with the new cost? People just haven't been accounting for it on that basis. So it's nothing that Merton have done specific, so it's nothing with your finance team or anything, or the records that you're held. It's what everyone across the country has done within England in the way that we've accounted for infrastructure assets and the way that we've audited it previously. We are expecting DLUC to issue the guidance, and therefore we should be able to issue an unqualified audit report if that guidance says what we think it's going to say. Where we were, and which is the reason why officers, and then I've agreed as well, it was either get an audit report for the 30th of November to meet the deadline, but that would mean getting a qualified audit report, because we would be saying that you don't have sufficient records and information to support what is a multiple materiality figure in your financial statements. But then there is no added value to the reader of the accounts for qualifying the accounts on that basis, when we knew that there was going to be a statutory override issued by government, and that then SIP would prepare an updated code for you to prepare your revised information on for that note. So we have not sorry, we will not be issuing the audit report by the 30th of November, but it is for a very sensible decision that everyone has made that judgment to get there. Then probably taking you through kind of just the rest of the executive summary from our report, just to say that we sorry, I'm suffering from the after effects of a cold. We updated the materiality based on your draft 21-22 financial statements, and that just slightly increased the materiality level, and we've reported that to you in this report. We haven't changed the scope of anything other than the additional risk I've just talked about. On the status of the audit, we obviously prepared the report as at the 11th of November, and there are a number of areas outstanding. Probably the key one in relation to that is the valuation of the property, plant and equipment, so your valuation of your assets. EYRE, and for anyone on the committee last year, remember multiple discussions around the EY real estates testing and the valuation of your assets. We have almost concluded that work. We've got one asset that we're still discussing, and then we're just going to assess that over the population, but that work is in progress. We're looking to conclude it within the next couple of weeks, so that will definitely be finished before Christmas, so we're kind of done and dusted on everything from the audit side. Then there's just a few other areas where we're waiting for information from officers, just kind of complete that kind of the final sample testing where it's just difficult to find that information, or that we're just writing it up. We've got the information and we're just writing it up, but there's nothing in that list currently that is causing me a concern that could impact on your audit report. As Roger alluded to earlier, there may be amendments from the accounts from it, in particular around the grants and the COVID grant testing income, and that's just around the disclosure, so not the actual figure that you've recorded, but more around the disclosure of meeting the different categories of how it's accounted for in the accounts. But I'm not envisaging kind of anything that would lead to a change in the unqualified audit report that I'm proposing. Our value for money work, we didn't report any significant weaknesses against the 3 criteria under the NAO's code. We're obviously keeping maintained until we actually sign the opinion, but as it stands, we've not been aware of anything that would change that need and to do additional work around significant weakness. So again, I'm not proposing to modify the report for anything around the value for money arrangements at the council this year. We, in the audited differences section, we've identified a small number of errors that have just been adjusted for in the accounts. They're all of a lower value and not needing to be brought to your individual attention. There are 2 in the executive summary that we have done, one around a number of errors in the collection fund, and they've all been worked through, and a revised collection fund is in the accounts presented to you tonight from officers. And then cash in the draft accounts was understated due to schools balances, and we also have a balance of around 1.4 million around schools funds themselves, and it's created a topic of conversation, should we say, within EY, because we are all looking at it at a slightly different angle. I'm relatively comfortable that they shouldn't be in your accounts, and therefore we're not expecting an amendment on that basis, but I have just flagged in the report because as at the date of writing it, we were still just investigating that with officers as well to say what is it, and there's nothing written down in black and white to say include or exclude, so it's just kind of we're going on that pragmatic, what do we expect to see, and does the council have any rights over that cash, and therefore could they direct the spend of it, which we don't think there is. So from that, I think I'm comfortable there won't be a further amendment to the cash balance, but it's just until we've kind of agreed EY wise, and across all the, obviously all of our audits with schools have the same issue, and therefore we just want to check consistency across our bodies. And there are no unadjusted misstatements. So the letter of representation that's in front of you tonight to kind of consider, there are no unadjusted misstatements, and management usually correct all of the errors identified or misstatements identified in the account, so we're not expecting them to be so. Just to say, we don't have any other kind of reporting issues. There are no legal or areas where I've got to report by exception at all with any of the kind of the powers that I have to do so. Your annual governance statement and your narrative statement were consistent with my knowledge, and therefore we've audited those and satisfied with the disclosures made in them. The whole of government accounts can't be audited yet, and that's because the guidance, the NAO is still working through the 2021 whole of government accounts return process, so they haven't yet issued guidance for 21-22. But apart from not being able to close the audit certificate, there is no impact on your audit report and nothing that you need to do in response to that. We've identified 2 control deficiencies. These are not significant or material in nature. They are just areas for improvement in future years. So they're nothing to particularly flag to your attention, but the details in the report. And that's all I was going to say on that side. Shall I go to the pension fund high level one, or would you like to stop for questions there?
Maybe we could take some questions there. I just wanted to clarify something you said, that but for the valuation of infrastructure, you would be giving us an unqualified audit report. Is that my understanding?
Yep, on the work done today, there is nothing arising that would lead to a qualified audit report. And from the work outstanding, I feel the relationship we have with officers, and obviously through you, Chair, as well, of kind of working through the approval of those charge of governance, there would not be anything that arose that would lead us to qualifying the audit report.
And the other point you raised about the 1.4 million in schools accounts, I mean, certainly we have no control over that. So your assessment of the situation is correct, I think. But how was it treated last year?
So last year, it wasn't actually identified. It's because we got a comprehensive bank statement this year. So obviously, because it's not your cash, it shouldn't be in your bank reconciliation, and therefore it shouldn't be in your ledger. So it's never actually been identified before. But because we got a very comprehensive bank statement at year end that they have to write directly to me to confirm third party assurance over your year end cash balance is held, there were a lot of counts in there that we didn't recognise and weren't in your ledger or in your bank reconciliation process, and therefore we were just asking the questions, and then officers did investigations as to what they were and where, and it generally relates to kind of PTA raised funds for that individual school, and therefore then they're in a separate bank account. So yeah, it was just one of EY have we've increased our procedures again over cash and the bank accounts held, and we do enhanced audit procedures than we did last year, say, because of some cash findings that we had in quality reviews across the whole of EY, and therefore we've just enhanced procedures and what we do and the level of detail we ask for from the banks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else got any questions? I think go for it.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can, yes.
Yeah, good. Just the cash thing, I'm not quite clear about it. In your statement, it says cash in the draft accounts was understated by 1.1 million due to the ledger not agreeing to the bank reconciliations. Is that to do with schools, or is that something else?
No, that was also to do with schools balances as well.
And then there's another 1.4. I take it that's another 1.4 here, which is the second item.
Yes, the other 1.4 is the one I've just been talking about, that I'm satisfied that it is kind of the PTA raised funds, and therefore they kind of belong to the school, and they're not actually under the control of the council to direct the expenditure of those funds. And therefore, actually, it's correct that that 1.4 is not within your accounts. But the 1.1 million is just, yeah, that was an error in the bank reconciliation, bank statement confirmations, and the ledger, and therefore the accounts have been amended to include that balance now.
Now, I know in your world, 1.1 million is just a rounding. Seems rather a lot of money to have mislaid.
I wouldn't say it's miscellaneous, the officers can come in. We don't think there was no fraud element to it whatsoever. So it's not that it's mislaid, it's purely an accounting, the way the accounts were done, the way the school's returns process work, and then the information provided over, and then how that sits in the ledger. I'll let officers explain probably in far more comprehensive way than I would about that.
Yes, through you, Chair, I can explain that there was an error on a journal. In our draft accounts, we had understated our debtors. Sorry, we understated our cash and overstated our debtors. So there was no actual issue with the amount of cash. That was not affected at all. It was solely an accounting entry. Yes.
Thank you. So,
Right, can I ask another question?
another question.
Okay, so I was minded not to approve these because having read through your report, well, first of all, the report itself was blank, and you said that you weren't in a position to write it yet. And secondly, reading through, there were lots of things that appeared to be outstanding or still work in progress. Now, I guess that was written several weeks ago, and maybe the situation has changed. But in order for us to approve the accounts, I think you'd have to give us a very clear statement that everything is fine apart from this infrastructure issue.
So I would say that everything is fine, obviously apart from the infrastructure issue, and we're also still, as I said earlier, working through the PPE valuation for one significant asset that is left that we are just speaking through our EY research. No, that's just a normal kind of asset that is held under your PPE balance.
Right. And does that,
and that work is still in progress.
Does that have the potential to be a material problem?
So it could be a material judgment. If it was, we would obviously either bring it back to you or through the delegated responsibility to the chair, depending on what the committee decide. It would then be definitely reported to the whole committee via an email, or a special committee could be set up if you so wished. It is a work in progress. Valuation is obviously a highly complex area. It is two experts making judgments, and therefore then there will always be disagreements. They are the two key areas that are in the accounts, the infrastructure and then the asset valuation. That is kind of in progress, I suppose, as at today. The rest of the items, I'm quite satisfied that they would not lead to material misstatements in the accounts. We don't have an audit report in there because we drafted it on the 11th of November. We still weren't sure what was coming from DLUC or SIPFA, and we've had kind of reassurance since that date to say that the guidance should be coming out and this is what it would say, and therefore then it will now, if it comes out as we're expecting it to, it would then lead to an unqualified audit report. But as the 11th of November, we still did not have that guidance, should we say, and we were still in a position where I didn't know whether we were qualifying the accounts or not.
All right, so just to understand, if we approve the accounts subject to there might be further changes, it's sort of like a bit of a semi-approval of the accounts. How would those further changes be addressed by us?
So it's often the case where you do approve the accounts, then have the delegated responsibility through the chair and then through the vice chair as well. So therefore then we would communicate, and I usually write to the whole committee if they would like to say our audit is now complete, these are the additional findings that we've made since this, these are any of the amendments, and Roger and the finance team would take you through those amendments to say this is the set of accounts as was, this is now the set of accounts that is the final version that could then get circulated via email to the whole committee, and then obviously kind of an additional meeting one-on-one if needed with the chair and you as the vice chair.
So you and I would decide.
Well, it would only be the PPE thing that you anticipate, but if there was any other change that you've discovered, although you've completed your work in those areas, so is that the normal process that comes back through the chair?
Yes, yeah, that's then the delegated responsibility to then you for signing the letter of representation, and to Roger as effectively the kind of interim section 151 officer for then having that delegated responsibility to approve the financial statements. I don't know if she wants to come in.
We can do it together. We do that together. Yes, we can agree to that. Thank you. That means
okay. Any other questions?
I think Namashi wants to comment.
All right, sorry, yes. Namashi.
Thank you, Chair. One of the recommendation on the report is delegate the power to the section 151 officer and also the chair of the Standard and General Purpose Committee to sign when the accounts are ready. And also we have the next Standard and General Purpose Committee on the 9th of March. And so any major changes, we'll update it on that committee meeting.
Right, thank you. So shall we can move on to the pension. Oh, no, I think so.
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, the Pensions Committee reviewed this report a couple of weeks ago, so they've already kind of taken through it. And the good news is the pension fund audit is pretty much complete. The set of accounts that is here in front of you today is amended as required for everything that we've identified to date, and there are no unadjusted misstatements in the accounts. Just to say, we had a number of significant risks. They're kind of the standard risks you'd expect in the pension fund around the valuation level 3 investments, and then the misstatement due to fraud or error that's in all sets of accounts, and that was just around the post of investment journals. We are satisfied that that work is complete and that there are no there are no issues that would impact on the audit report. We did identify one misstatement in the valuation level 3 investments, but that was due to the timing of the information being received by the council. Because of the nature of level 3, you need audited accounts and kind of information that is later than your actual preparation of the draft accounts deadline, and therefore there are always misstatements and changes in valuations when it relates to level 3 investments. So it's not something that I would be worried about from an internal controls perspective. It is just the reporting nature of pension fund accounts. And then just to say, we've not identified any internal control weaknesses, and we actually have no kind of other reporting issues to do. There's been no kind of issues with laws or regulations or compliance with kind of any of the pension standards that the pension fund needs to meet. So that was really all I was going to say on the pension funds. It's been a straightforward process. And we're literally just waiting for the final wrap-up procedures. We are unable to sign the pension fund audit report because it's linked to the council's audit report, and obviously because of infrastructure, that is then held up because they need to both be signed on the same day.
But in terms of other than that infrastructure, you'd have no issues with signing the pension fund audit report.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
Any questions on the pension fund? And this has been through the pensions committee. Who I know is full of people who are dedicated to talking about pension. A number of us here have avoided that for a long time. So any questions? First, I put that little questions there.
My list too exciting.
Yes, it is important. I don't underestimate how important it is, but it's been talked about a lot. Okay. There are no questions on that. Thank you. So we're at a point where in consultation with Roger, and I will consult with the Vice Chair as well before we sign and accept the PPE valuation and the audit report, which will come, the letter will come back on the 9th of March, we hope, if everything has moved ahead by then. Okay. That agreed? Okay, thank you.
Can I just say, we are hoping to sign before the 9th of March. We're hoping that it can be wrapped up, that once the guidance is out from DLUC towards, well, early next month, that then we'll be able to work it through and process it into January. So we don't want to delay to the next committee if that is suitable for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Due to Croydon. Say due to Croydon?
No.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry.
Croydon doesn't impact our account.
That's where I would have heard the word. Right.
No, we don't have.
Thank you very much. So I think, is that your involvement finished for the evening? Or are you going to stay on?
It is, if that's okay, but if you'd like me to stay on, then I'm more than happy to.
No. Can you just find out how we contact you if you have any other questions?
We do those through Roger.
Yes.
Okay, I'm happy to, we'll circulate. This is, you're
Please
entitled
know there's a list of questions I didn't ask.
You're entitled to contact her directly.
Right, so you'll be getting an email directly. Okay, thank you,
That-
Liz, for your time.
That's
and,
more than all right. I'm happy to answer anything from any member of the committee via
Can't be
email
continued too.
or a
Okay.
meeting separately. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, risk management.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, this is just an update on our risk management within Merton, and includes details of the strategic risks faced and issues faced by the council. In summary, you have the details there before you. But basically, there are currently 13 key strategic risks and 2 key strategic issues on the strategic risk register. And just to clarify, a risk is defined an event which might occur in the future, and an issue is one that is occurring. You see what I mean? So that clarifies that. And there's 5 strategic risks and 2 strategic issues which are classified as red. And we use what I call the STORM methodology for classifying our risks, and that's about looking at the likelihood of an event, and should that occur, what would be the impact? And with those 2 assessments, and there's a degree of subjectivity within that, I'm sure, we get a score, and you can see the details of those within the 13 strategic risks and the 2 issues that are contained within the pack before you tonight. The 1 red risk and 1 red issue, which is scored 18, which is very high, obviously, is around the risk is around basically being able to produce a balanced budget, and that simply reflects the challenges that the council faces every year in terms of balancing its resources against its spend against its income, and quite rightly, in my view, one of our highest risks, because it is the biggest challenge we face financially as a council, and that's unlikely to change year on year, particularly with the challenges that the council faces at the moment and has faced in the past. So no surprises there. And the second issue is the challenges we face in delivering our annual savings. Now, annual savings, when they are accepted within the budget, obviously they are there to help balance the budget, and the extent to which, again, there are challenges in providing in delivering those savings through natural events and also changing circumstances, as we've experienced, again, give rise to a high score there, quite rightly again, and in many ways it concentrates certainly the management team's attention and then attention on those particular areas. But you can also see the other 3 red risks and 1 red issue as outlined in the report around the fair cost of care, supporting children with additional needs, etc. By way of a comparison for previous years, we've had in the past, this time last year, we had 20 key strategic risks and issues. So with the 15 we have now, as I said, the 13 risks and the 2 issues, we've managed to reduce those strategic risks. And it's something that the management team and indeed the risk management working group keep a close eye on a regular basis and periodically review those risks. So you have the detail before you. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you.
Just obviously got a question, obviously, first in relation to cyber attacks in 16. Obviously, we have seen major attack on one of our major housing providers, Clarion, this year, which has caused all kinds of issues.
Yeah.
But given obviously there's also a very danger of cyber attack, it's obviously the contingency arrangements which exist within the council in the event that we were attacked, us, and backup arrangements in relation to that. And the other thing obviously I've got in relation to risk management is in relation to pandemic planning. I mean, obviously, heaven forbid, we got a COVID variant that caused all kinds of problems, again, in terms of the council, especially obviously in relation to adult social care, obviously quite interested in relation to risk management in terms of that, because obviously when it struck a few years ago, we obviously did have contingency arrangements in place. And they were tested to the core, but they worked generally quite well. And the final point is obviously in relation to adult social care. Clearly, obviously, the reforms have been delayed. I think local government is universally very pleased they have been given, in terms of government preparation, clearly was insufficient. But we recognise obviously there's long-term issues, whether it happens or not. Well, there's a good point really, in terms of that, given they've been deferred now further. Obviously in relation to the update on that point as well, because that has been a big issue, I know, internally.
So the next over the cyber
Pandemic.
and
Yeah.
social care.
In terms of cyber, you're absolutely right. It is a quite rightly recognised as a major risk that we continuously face. I mean, it does require us to have business continuity arrangements in place, which we do. Fortunately, we have not been adversely affected by major cyber attacks as other councils have. There's been some celebrated incidences where some councils have been subject to cyber attacks, and there's, we've taken them a very long time, and some are still in recovery mode. So we quite rightly recognise that as a major risk and prepare ourselves for it, and make sure that we have not only effective training in place, which is pretty comprehensively developed and delivered throughout the council, and all senior managers, part of their responsibility to make sure they are kept up to date and follow the right training, most up-to-date training on cyber attacks, etc., so that we can remain safe, and that that training and that awareness is continually raised with senior officers and managers who hold some very sensitive data from that point of view, and obviously are aware of the risks of phishing and all of that, sort of the ills that can befall us. So that will continue to be a risk, and we will prepare ourselves accordingly. With regards to a further pandemic, well, actually, when we had COVID, we've only just sort of blended the COVID risk register into our main strategic risk register. But when we did have a separate COVID register, it had some 85 separate risks involved, and we've been managing that. Again, it's down to business continuity plans, and I think the council equipped itself well during the COVID pandemic, and enabled us to test our business continuity arrangements again to the fore, and we are continuing to consider and to test internally those business continuity arrangements should another pandemic hit the council. And with the adult social care reforms being delayed, well, of course, we wait for the detail when they come and if they come from that point of view. But I think they've been delayed again for some 2 years, I think they read. So it is some way off. But we can only prepare ourselves when we see the detail of those reforms when they come in.
Any other questions?
Can I just briefly ask, was there any pressure on the cost of living and also the Chancellor's post budget? Was there a risk to the council?
Yeah, well, the reserve cost of living is a risk that we will need to build in, and in many ways it's manifests itself on our ability to produce a balanced budget and to deliver the services that we are required to deliver within the resources we have available. So it is a constant within us. So we will either choose that as a separate risk, or we will, or it is covered within the need to balance the budget, which is why that in many ways that's the highest risk, because a lot of the impact on the council from cost of living crisis is yet to manifest itself. We recognise that that in many ways, as we sort of head towards a recession and the cost of living crisis, the demand for our services is likely to increase, and pressure on services is likely to increase. And in many ways, we're seeing some of that impact already showing through in terms of the budget monitoring reports that you're we are currently receiving, and they go to cabinet on a regular basis through the directorate, pressures on directorate spending in some key areas. And so that will continue to be one that we will have to monitor and prepare for. But as I said earlier, some of the impact of the cost of living crisis is yet to manifest itself in terms of the demand for the council services.
It will come in two ways. It'll be the demand on services because of the impact on the population.
Yeah.
But inflation has an impact on the council itself.
Does.
So achieving a balanced budget and achieving savings targets becomes more difficult.
As members will see, as the budget reports go to cabinet, there's one going to cabinet on the 5th of December, just been published. Inflation is one of our major financial risks now. You know, 6-9 months ago, it wasn't really a major risk at all. So it just shows you how events can change.
Yeah.
And the council needs to be agile enough to respond to that. But writ large throughout the pressures that we face within the budget for next year and future years, and indeed the current year, with the rigors of inflation and the impact that that's having on the council budget.
But what effect did it have on the mini budget from Lisbon? Was there a big risk from that?
Yeah, the impact that the budget, the budget that this trust put through was in many ways short term. It had an impact on the gilt prices, and that's and it had an impact on inflation and government borrowing. And you'll notice that the Bank of England base rate has now risen to some 3%. So in many ways, the response to some of the market uncertainty that was created initially through that budget has manifested itself in a higher interest rate. But over time, I would expect some of that to settle down as the markets become more confident in the British economy going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, Roger, thank you very much for your training performance earlier. That was very well received, I think. First question I wanted to ask you was, you see this little matrices that you've got. Do they reflect the situation before or after mitigation?
They reflect the situation sort of as a result of the mitigation, yes. I mean, I think you have to recognise this first, and then the mitigation comes in, as you can see from that. So it should reflect.
So this is
it's sort of a work in progress.
This is the remaining bit, even though we've done that.
I think it's work in progress for some of them, to be fair. It does reflect because it depends on how current the risk is and how well the mitigations have been thrown out. So some of it will reflect the impact of the mitigation. In some cases, the mitigation will have an impact as going time. And so what we try and do there is show you the trends. So if you look at each risk, it'll show you how it's moved in time. Some of them have come down, some of them haven't. And so in some cases, the mitigation has delivered some impact, and some it's really just about managing that risk. And some of it, to be fair, we have to recognise there are external factors that you can't really do a huge amount about in terms about the external resources.
So that is intended to be the position after the mitigation.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question I wanted to ask you was, there's a couple of ones here which don't seem to have any control actions. And I wonder if you could just think why that was. For example, risk of cyber attack, even when you look at the control actions column, it just says this risk was peer reviewed and agreed that the current risk is still appropriate. It doesn't actually tell you any control action. And there's several others like that.
Okay. Well, there's probably gaps in there that will need to manifest. I mean, there will be action plans that have been developed that perhaps weren't included.
Well, there's a number like that.
Which one?
That
Yeah,
one.
there probably
Public
is.
contract regulations. I won't bore you with the whole climate. And savings, annual savings, no mitigations there, no change to risk score. It's the job is not just to evaluate the risk, is it? It's actually to do something about it.
As far as you can. Yes.
Or maybe then it should
So
say,
maybe
maybe it should say no action possible.
Well, to a certain extent, yeah, we need to reflect the expectations from the council. We can do little about, but yes, there's probably more we can do in terms of outlining the control actions. You can see I suppose it's quite difficult in that column to fully populate it.
Well,
There will be action plans
go on
behind
great
that.
length and others.
Sorry, I missed it.
Some are very long and others are very
Indeed.
short. Those are my questions. Okay. Thank you.
Chair.
Right.
Yeah, just on that, is it just to follow on the question? Is that being drawn out where there's a blank, if you like? I think that's what you're saying, where things are blank. I think you're absolutely right about there's some things you can't do. And you don't, probably that we don't want to put in documents, nothing we can do about that approach. But is there some way of drawing them particulars out? And I don't know, having some kind of narrative about why that is. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, I mean, it's something that the risk management group, which meets on a quarterly basis, will go out, and also CMT, when it reviews the strategic risk register, will also pick up. So yeah, it is work in progress.
But this is a strategy, tells you great that for everybody, this gets reviewed by this, gets reviewed by this, gets reviewed by that. But yeah, it still gets through.
Yeah. I think what would be useful is explaining the rationale in some of those areas. Like, you know, I'm trying to think of an example where it's difficult to, you know, plan. But some kind of, as we say nowadays, narrative as to why we can't do much about that particular instance. I think would be really useful, really, just in terms of explaining that the reason why you can do this, this, and this with these particular things, but in these instances where we've got less control of the things, this is the kind of rationale. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, we'll continue looking to improve the way you report the zone for manager. So happy to take your comments on board.
Okay.
One thing that when I was looking at it, I was thinking that, and it's quite right that the ones that are flagged with the high red numbers, balancing the budget and achieving setting a balanced budget and achieving the savings, they are always going to be risks and they will probably always be high. But are there any bubbling along under the surface, any trends that you perhaps would want to raise as a concern? Because we've got a year going back on each one of these, and they're all showing there's one where there's a change in number, but most of them it's the same level of risk over time. Are there any that have been constantly there or thereabouts, or just on an upward trend over the last few years that we perhaps could
Sorry, Chair, do you mean risks that haven't made the strategic risk
no,
register?
risks that are on here,
Yes.
but where, because a number of them are staying at the same level, and although they're managed risks, are there any that are on an upward trajectory? Slow but sure. Are there any on a downward trajectory?
Pretty well. Obviously, I mean, one is equality.
Quality has gone down. Yes,
it's going down.
But again, it's these are only over the last year. That's all I'm thinking.
Yes.
And if we look back further, are there any that have got a long-term cause for concern? You know, that could pop into a higher red category at some point.
Wouldn't demographics feed into social care? I mean, I forgot what I've seen somewhere in one of these that I think our population is 57% or something like that. I've forgotten the exact figure now. In terms of
older
people are getting older.
Oh yeah.
But that risk is on an upward trend in it if we haven't got social care. So although it's the demographics are bouncing along, the whole country's getting older. But I don't know.
I think you got to be mindful of what you can put in as a risk that you can actually try and do something about. I appreciate that some can't, but those will be picked up in our ability to deliver a balanced budget, and i.e., you know, deliver the services that we're required to deliver statutorily within that balanced budget framework.
I wasn't looking for an answer tonight.
No,
So I was looking
yeah.
for another time.
Yeah.
If there's anything that
You're right.
I mean,
that's
on the
going
right line.
steadily upwards,
yeah,
or a success where it's steadily going downwards, but we're not seeing it because we're only looking at the last year.
yeah. I think what we're doing at the moment, what we're constantly doing is revisiting this and looking at this and saying, are these the strategic risks that we should be looking at? So you may get breaks in those trends because we may got the risk and moved on. But I haven't got the detail with me tonight in terms of the risks that we've reduced from the 20 last time we reported this to the 15 that we have now.
Right. Yeah. Are there no other questions?
I'd just like to make a comment, it's not a question really, but just to point out to everyone that these are risks to the council, they're not risks to the people. So there's a risk, for example, that a lot of our people might be living in substandard accommodation. That's a major risk to them, but it's not here because it's not a risk to us. That's all I wanted to say. It's just our risk, as if we were a corporation or a private company. It's like the things that might affect us as a council, but not necessarily the things that affect
But the, yes and no, because they're risks to us, but they could threaten our ability to deliver services to residents, which then may impact on the quality of people's lives. So I think that's great. And what Karen experienced is. a result of that. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you for the risk work there. We can move on to item 9, then I think, which is the annual gifts and hospitality reports of members, which we're obliged to look at each year. And you'll have had put on the table in front of you something that looks very much like what you had in your pack, but it's not quite the same because this is the updated version. 2022. Well, the page went on we see a list of all our names, either one part of it or another. I think it's for noting really, but what I would like to emphasize, particularly as a council, we've had a large turnover of councillors, or new councillors, but just to bear this in mind, and you have the clear guidance here. It's and the test of reasonability really, I think, of whether to declare is not only the rules, but also what would a member of the public think if they knew that you'd gone to the pantomime. Or you know, whatever it is.
You're at the pantomime.
Yes. 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 Very good. But so I mean, there could be a risk of over-reporting, but just have a look at what's there and also speak to your colleagues who are not on standards, just to say, particularly if they're new colleagues on the council, that just think about it and have a scan through. If you see something against someone else's name, you think, actually, I was there as well. Maybe I should have put that in additionally, then I think that will enhance it. You shouldn't put in ticket to that football. I was, I don't have to put in, I was offered the ticket because I was a season ticket holder and I was there anyway. No, I think head of league could actually verify that bit. I think it could.
Well, there's two things, if I may, Chair. So the code of conduct does say that you should register gifts that you've been offered and declined if they're significant, but significant isn't defined in the code of conduct, so the subject to judgment on that one. But the other thing, just we are actually asking for the committee to approve a slight change to the protocol on gifts and hospitality, which isn't formally part of the code of conduct, but is guidance designed to assist members, and that's the document laid round. Apologies, you got the wrong version of the published agenda.
Yellow bits.
So the yellow bits primarily really the principal issues are towards the back on page 5. It's got page numbered. 2 paragraphs headed up Wimbledon theatre, pantomime and all English and tennis championship. The proposed amendments, the protocol in relation to the Wimbledon theatre pantomime, which all members are offered an opportunity to attend by virtue of a free ticket. We agreed, this committee agreed in November 21, that you wouldn't need to register that even if you went, because it's a benefit that's offered to all councillors. So we have something on the website making that clear to residents. So you don't need to re-declare every year. That's just a proposed amendment to reflect what this committee had previously agreed, although of course the committee is free to unagree if it wishes. And then the second aspect relates to the tennis championships. And again, what we're proposing here, and it's a matter for members, is that you don't have to declare the fact that if you're entering into the lottery and you are got the opportunity to buy tickets, if you do choose to buy those tickets, you don't have to declare it on the gifts and hospitality register because you pay full price for them. And in fact, you look at the list of declarations made over last year, there are some councillors there who were lucky enough to get their name pulled out of the hat, as it were, but then went on to buy full price tickets. So a view is that in those circumstances, again, there'd be an explanatory note on the website explaining that you do get the chance to have your name put in the hat, but that if you actually do purchase them, you don't need to require them to register that separately. And that's the matter for this committee. You may choose to revert to the current position, which is that you do have to register it if you end up buying it.
Can I throw that out? So just to clarify, the Wool and Theatre pantomime one, that was a decision made last year, and this is just codifying it.
Yeah, that's correct.
And the All England one is a slight change to what we had currently.
Right.
So that will be a change.
So if you're a member of the WTA and you get your ticket via the do you register that? Because I'm a member of the WTA, I can buy my tickets because I pay my membership. And what I've been doing, I've been registering it, but I don't think I should be.
If you're a member in your personal capacity and not because you're a councillor, then that doesn't need to be registered. All you ever need to register is something that you only got it or got offered it because you were a councillor.
So if you win the lottery in the tennis, you register it.
If you, or we're proposing that you don't in this case, because you still have to pay. So you don't get free tickets to go and see Wimbledon. You get your name gets put into a hat, which gives you a slightly better chance of being able to buy tickets than your average member of the public. But you still do have to pay full price for them.
You don't have to register.
There would be something on the website explain that all councils have an equal chance of being getting tickets.
But that's not all council if you're a member of the club.
No, the club is that's separate. So you're
That's separate.
so
So you
you're
don't
fine with
have to
that.
register that.
We just need to be your friends, so you can give them to us. On a personal basis. Yes. So let's first of all deal with the pantomime issue. That was agreed last year. That's what happened last year. The pantomime's coming up next Tuesday. I didn't realise we got one big one, but anyway, I was about to, but never mind that. But are we happy to leave the pantomime one as it stands?
Yeah.
And include that in the code.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving on to the All England lawn tennis. This represents a change. It would reduce the workload of democratic services in terms of having to add all these in and answer all the questions about them by having one statement out there. But do members feel that that is sufficient given the profile? That no one's going to see you in a pantomime necessarily, but they might see you on television at the tennis. So that's the question there.
I mean, I think it comes back to the point that you made about how would the members of the public perceive it.
Yes.
And my view is, without wanting to put extra work on democratic services, I think this is something that should be declared, because the reality is you might have paid full price for your centre court ticket, but people will regard that as as worth more than you paid just because of the nature of it. So I think we should. It's one of those things. If it was on the front page of the Daily Mail, would you want it there? You probably wouldn't. And I think we'd much better to have an individual that you hadn't declared it, have an individual declaration making it clear.
So leaving it as it is. Yes. In fact. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask something. I mean, it's probably me being, because I'm new and I don't understand these things, but if the mayor asks you to go to something to accompany her, do we declare that? Because obviously Jones asked me to go along with her to a couple of things when a consort couldn't go.
I'm answering past mayor, but as my understanding is that the mayor's office deals with everything.
Yeah.
That basically, if you're mayor, then you don't have to do every individual declaration.
Yeah.
And that would apply to a consult as well. It'd be up to you whether you would want to put it on there and say that I went to something as the mayor's consult.
Right.
But I don't think there's a requirement. If you ended up sitting in the royal box at Wimbledon, because the mayor liked you that much, then you might want to put that on there. but the mayor wouldn't need to. I
Right.
think is that probably.
That's correct, and it's covered, under civic ceremonial, and the following paragraph underneath the highlighted paragraph about tennis.
Right. So,
Can I just clarify the point about offers of hospitality that you reject? You say there's no material without guidelines. Would it be useful to have something of about sort of £100 or something like that rather than 35, so it becomes more material? I mean, as a member of the pension committee, I'm always getting requests from investment advisors to go along to champagne receptions and whatever, and I don't go, and I don't even reply because they're suspicious. But it is like a hospitality thing, or it could be construed as. But because I'm rejecting it.
It does say 25. Yeah.
It says 25, that's if you accept it, but the
No, decline as well.
well, the code, yeah, there may be another, the code is slightly different, the wording in the code is slightly different. It says single return, so let's be consistent, I suppose, because this is the protocol, not the code.
this is the protocol is the guide.
The protocol of the guidance, the code is a breach of which you can find yourself up in front of a hearing subcommittee. So if you were, a suggestion is a sensible one, I think, maybe, that you have a higher threshold for the decline offers than you do for accepted offers. And would we like to go with 100 or just, or put it into the guidance?
How we know the value, if it's something that's marketed.
But we don't.
Yes, so
the issue, but you can take an educated guess of what something is. Most of these things, you know, if it's a champagne or a dinner, it's probably still under £100.
Well, perhaps we could deal with it by expanding that third bullet point to say, for instance, in the region of, rather than have a fixed £25, some wording to the effect of the way you've declined a gift, the threshold is higher. You may consider an estimated value of around 100 to be significant as a matter of your judgment, or some wording to that effect.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Chair, I'm not following it. What I know the paving, but what are you saying if somebody's been offered a gift of up to £100, that needs to be declared, is that right?
If they don't accept
If they don't accept it. So, moment you have to register it if you accept it, and the £25 is your threshold. The suggestion is that if you've actually said no, there's a slightly higher threshold, because the example being given is being invited for jollies if you're on the pension committee every couple of weeks.
Why is it £100?
Well, that's just. I think
that was
floated.
Yeah, but it's £25 if you accept the gift, yeah? So why do you change the figure when you don't accept the gift?
because you've not had any
No, you've not had any benefit, but you've had the offer. I don't understand why it goes up. If someone says to you, by the way, I have been on the front of the Daily Mail, so paid on Sunday actually, accused of living in a leafy Mitchell.
Yeah, you want the paper, you want the Daily Mail.
But I don't understand why the figure goes up.
Well, I think the logic is that the requirement to declare when you've had something.
Yeah.
Is a lower threshold because you have had the benefit of it, as Oliver says. If it's just been offered to you and you've declined it, the onus on you to declare more frequently when you haven't even accepted it is perhaps onerous, whereas you might accept it that actually if it's something.
Oh, so I get it now. So like, because it's you're getting loads of freebies, obviously, that's quite coming across in this meeting. Because of the pension. No, but I get the point being, right, sorry to interject. But the point being, if you're getting loads of these freebies, well, I've got to get on that pension committee, obviously. And you're declining them. Someone's offering you £10, this or that. It's a bit onerous to do anything under 25. Got it? Okay, that's fine with me. Thank you.
Okay.
So just so I'm clear, if I'm going to go and amend it and recirculate it verbally, I'll put some wording in that makes it clear. There's a higher threshold for declined offers. But just coming back to the tennis for a moment, are we going with Councillor McGrath's suggestion that actually we should make the current position that you do?
Yes, I mean, I have sympathy with that view as well, I think, because if you're seen on television sitting there, then it's just clearer if someone,
Mm.
if they're that concerned, they may look it up on the website, see if you're there, and it's just, it's done and dusted.
But we don't have to declare if we didn't.
If you don't,
You know, if you bought a ticket to go there yourself under your own steam, or you've got an entry to someone else getting it, then as Edith, as a member of the.
Yes, a member of the LT and I'm also a member of the World Tennis Association. I
Right.
can buy tickets every day.
So when you're flying in though, you don't have to declare anything.
I don't have to declare anything.
So we'll put a note, we'll leave a note on the website that says that all members are entered into the lottery.
Yes.
Oh, the onus is only if you then allocate and you actually purchase, and then
Yes.
those numbers will chose.
Yeah.
You allocate, you win and you then go ahead and buy, then you register.
Yeah, so that actually what we. The follow on, because most of the tickets are over £100.
Yeah.
What we've just decided will be that you would still have to register it. To say that I won my place in the lottery, but I declined it.
No, we just said.
No, I think we're saying that, I think.
Oh, right,
that's
okay.
right.
That's too
Well,
right.
then you can
All right,
take
okay.
it.
We'll have a very discreet provision around the tennis.
Yes. Got it. Did you have a point there?
It's just on the list of who's got benefits. I did win and I submitted a form, but I'm not on there. So I know someone else who's not on there, so I don't.
I
Who-
think
do
there's a
I
bit of a
see that?
time lag in some of this
Oh.
getting on there. I don't know how much of a time lag, but when you do it at the time.
Yes, yeah, at the time.
They contact member services really. isn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
I
that's
think-
what
Well,
I would-
Rachel, that's all right.
Yes,
I
Yeah.
think there's someone else, I'll let you know.
and also share that, it's a public document, share it with your group. And just
Yeah.
say, if anyone feels that there's something they may have submitted, because we're all learning.
Yeah.
Should have known better because I've been on the council longer, but new members, are they using the right form, are they sent to the right place and all those things? That's
Guidance on that.
just a double check.
Louise, would it be possible just to make sure that the code and the protocol tell the same story?
It would be very sensible, I think.
The other yellow bits that were in here. Were they, but are they, again, I'd like the pantomime codifying what was agreed previously, or are you asking us to clarify now?
They're just timing up really, but they don't have anything on it.
Okay. We've not had lots of them, but they're not that taxing, so does anyone have any comments on those? I was one that highlighted. Thank you very much. So those two, or not serial, but those particular changes. We're really, thank you. Similarly, the report for officers.
It's a much more straightforward, so we don't get right to it. Again, we assume that this is all there is, but we have considered this at our corporate management team, to remind the staff if they have admitted to register, they need to be doing that, and they need to use their judgment about when it is and when it is appropriate to accept such gifts.
But I noticed that the officers one says that the entries no longer include, because officers are in a lottery as well, aren't they? For the tickets. So we need to be consistent across the two.
I think it's quite different for offices, if I'm honest, but
Right.
so the chief executive is happy to do one, you know.
Mhm, okay. And what about if declining things, for instance?
They're also supposed to report and say decline in the same way.
We get passed through the mayor's office, things that gifts that come in.
And they'll do that.
And then we go, it should go through,
They should register and say that they've passed it, that's what they should do.
right?
They pass it to them, that's the guidance they get, it would be sensible to pass it to the mayors if they're uncomfortable taking them.
Is there any reason why the officers aren't named, the members in named, but in the officers report they're not named?
I think that's because the requirement to register gifts and hospitality is a code of conduct issue for members and regulated by this committee and be required to be published under the code of conduct anyway, whereas generally we wouldn't name individual officers in public documents.
I mean, I suppose if I was a member of the public, I might think it was of relevance to know that an officer responsible for something had received hospitality from
somebody involved in that? It's an odd thing, and what use is that information to me if I don't know who the officer is?
It does give both departments. So it's both department, the other. It only, I think it's a senior officer, isn't it? Senior officer. So it's identifiable by implication.
Michael, put the name.
I think, well, you could argue that, but I mean, I think as councillors, we put ourselves forward to be named people in the public, officers are entitled to it. Rather than not stepping out of line.
That's right.
Well,
You know, the similar analogy to it, to freedom of information act request for staff pay. We put things by bands, but we don't name individual officers, but we would make that information public.
Okay. So we accept it before and acknowledge that it's just as with the council's one, but we'd like it just to make sure that it's up to date. Okay. Thank you. The hearing subcommittee, we decided that we were going to have a hearing because there wasn't a hearing subcommittee. We don't want to do it for the whole committee. So this is just the mechanism for setting that up. I don't think we need to name names now, but is the size of it reasonable? I mean, it's actually 7. It's not that much smaller than the full committee, but and it would include independent. No, they can't include the independent members because they're the ones that then review whatever the finding of the hearing subcommittee will be. So
Well, they advise the hearing subcommittee.
they're
So
right.
they would be at the meeting, but they're not voting members.
So is 7 an appropriate size?
I'm just going to suggest 8, that it include one of the month independents, so that the committee doesn't have an overwhelming majority of any kind. And it's more balanced.
If it was less, what would be the number? I'm trying to work the arithmetic out. What would be the-
It's some maths now.
Yes.
Because you have to have a team proportion.
It's regulated under the housing, it's regulated under the Housing and Local Government Act. If a Merton Park resident was to be included, I would obviously have 9 and 7. I think it has to be an odd number because that's how we have to work in accordance with that.
So what would be the odd number?
7 or 9.
Would it be 3 and
these things are worked out using proportions and rounded up usually. So it could be that it would either be because of the size of the groups. We're not going to do the maths here tonight.
No.
I think that's clear. But it's
There were,
Wilson said that
in the original decision, there were several options and this committee decided on 7.
All right.
I wouldn't like to be quoted on whether there was a lower than 7 option, but my feeling is that there wasn't.
All right. If there was, can I have a copy of it?
Yeah.
Thanks.
We can,
Not-
I might be speaking too soon, but I haven't got any urgent need for one, so if you want to take it away and I'll have another look at it, council orders, right, there are rules around proportionality, and the first one is that you have to have the majority party has to have a majority on the body, and then the other seats have to be allocated in proportion.
if we stick it at 9, then that's pushing it too far. Are we happy to stick with 7?
7, yeah.
Okay. So can we ask that that you write to the group whips asking for, is that the way you do it, or with for the names of people or the secretaries of groups or whatever? The whip stroke secretary or leader of the group. It's the groups.
I think the leaders have all got, because everyone got whips, so that's the.
Yes.
Okay. Right, that's good, and hopefully we won't have a need for it, but it's good to listen up.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the last item is the work.
I have a point on the powers of the.
Sorry.
It's in section 10.1, and things that the subcommittee may do. And one of them, right towards the end, is withdraw facilities provided to them by the council, such as computer website or internet websites. Which seems to me that that is tantamount to removing the ability of the council to do their job. Because if the council can't access the council systems, you know, essentially they can't do their job. And so in the same way that we say they can still attend, have to be allowed to come into the council premises, I don't think we should have the facility to take away their ability to access the council system.
It does say may.
Yeah, well, indeed, but that's not a power that I think the committee should have, because essentially, if you say that, you're saying to the council, you can't represent their constituents.
It's, I'm speaking from the chair, just thinking that it could be, and we shouldn't prejudge whatever the violence was or the misdemeanor was, but it was about misuse of council resources, or in the way that they communicated with the public on that, that it may be an appropriate sanction, but I think that it wouldn't be a normal sanction.
I'd be happy if we were to specify that, and I was going to come back to, you know, I'd be happy if we specified that that could only be done where the council was using the council's email, for example. But as a general power, I think it gives this committee the power to take away somebody's ability to do their job. And that's clearly not envisaged by the next one that says they still have to be able to attend committee meetings.
But all I was saying, we're not putting it in front of you today for approval. This is just the background to the establishment of the committee. So this has already been through the standard general purposes last year and approved by the full council. So that's not to say you can't revisit it. No, we're not necessarily this.
Should we ask the subcommittee to review its remit when it's established, or?
No, I don't think the subcommittee can, because the hearing process is agreed by the.
Yeah,
It can be, I think, set in stone. If you wanted to have a future meeting, have another conversation about how it's drafted, then we could.
Could I ask, perhaps just to find out, officers could find out what other councils do, if this is a standard thing, or if it's done for us.
Yeah. I think we have agreed this, haven't we, previously? That's what you just said, yeah. But can I just add a right? Get the committee set up as soon as possible, for the reason being, I think the worst thing to happen is there's a case and then we set up a subcommittee. And I don't know if this is the most appropriate term to use, but these type of things need to be blind. You know, you need to be on the committee, part of the committee, and then a case comes along. If we set up a committee and put people on it and there's a live case coming down the line, that influences people. Yeah, so as the sooner it's set up, the better.
Well, I think that the committee can, that's not an issue, the committee can start very quickly by
Yeah.
getting the names from the groups.
Yeah.
The point is whether the sanctions are too severe in certain circumstances, or would contradict, there's contradictions within the report. And I think that if we could ask just to see what's, pull out one of the two of our peer groups and just see what they have as potential sanction for us for a standards hearing subcommittee, and if there's any anomalies, to come back through me and we bring it back to the future.
That's excellent.
Yes. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you for raising it. So we now are moving on to the work program. And then the last report tonight. There's one small change that I'm suggesting to the March. Well, it's just the title of the report really, is that we've got temporary and contract staff updates. And I was thinking about this and I come at it from a semi-retired HR professional, but I wonder whether we should broaden that to be HR metrics generally. Rather than, it still would include temporary and contract staff updates, but the reason I'm putting it on there is because I'm also a bit concerned about post-pandemic, what's the shape of the workforce, and is that changing over time? Has there been an impact on certain groups within the council, gender, race, age, and so we could be broadening it to look at that as well. And I understand that's achievable in terms of reporting, having asked before. And, so with the groups or with the committee's agreement, I'd like to broaden that topic. But still, and also the review terms of reference should be on the June one, I think.
Process review.
I think it wasn't so much terms of reference, Chair, as the new CIPA guidance recommends that audit committees, which you perform the function of for Merton, should do an annual review of their effectiveness.
Right.
So we're suggesting that we put that on the June committee, but we can bring a report in March explaining what the process will look like and do the review in June.
Right. Okay.
Also, the board person said that we should have 44, yeah, so that would be March.
Yes. Any other? We've got a pretty busy meeting on one of it. But we'll be refreshed. Okay, that agreed then. One last question, I'll just generally ask you, the council chamber wasn't available for this meeting, which is why we were in here, but again, go back to pre-pandemic times, committee meetings, other than sometimes overview and scrutiny, there was a large group coming to speak to them or hearing evidence, were always in here in these committee rooms.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take as much to heat it, which is a big plus. Is it a good setting? Did it work okay? We sometimes used to have little microphones with speakers on, which seemed a bit cumbersome and often didn't work properly. Pushing buttons. Can everyone hear?
But maybe you should ask the people who are online.
That's true. Yes.
I don't know.
Councillor Manley.
Councillor Manley has put in the chat, it worked for me at this end.
Indeed, sorry, Chair, just to say that I could hear very well as long as it's only one person talking. And I'm grateful to you for excusing me this evening. I was quite unwell. Thank you.
I hope you're feeling better soon. Yeah.
One would hope that the Imodium works.
I think that was a bit too much information, but thank you very much anyway.
Can I just make the point, obviously, if it's held in here, it's in relation to IT PowerPoints as well, because obviously they are on this side, they need to be obviously fully installed, given obviously we use laptops. And I think microphone use should be considered, obviously, if it is a larger meeting and has public in attendance as well.
Yes.
I mean, clearly that's cautionary, but I think in terms of picking things up, and especially given that these meetings are streamed as well, that is important.
Yes. Well, the technology for streaming is now in place, so this has been streamed.
So we have got a microphone, I do know.
Yeah, and there's a microphone on the
Yes.
hour in the middle, and anyone watching it would have seen who's speaking, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
They'll see what's up there.
It's rotated round. Oh, yes. It just moved now.
Well, it seems to be quite clear, yeah. I mean, I
So-
suppose it's, I haven't.
And
been
there's
in
probably a
meetings
lot of
since-
gadgetry in those black
Yeah.
boxes at the end, which may have microphone working.
I'm quite happy with this.
It's
So
quite happy, but-
we'll have it next time. And
But
advocate it
if
to
we could
other-
just ensure that we have requisite PowerPoints as well, because that does, instead of things hanging over.
Maybe something needs to be taped along.
Yeah,
just a
there
couple
does
of the
need to
tables
be, just
to them.
in terms of a safe perspective.
I won't
I'll
expect you
make
to thought of
inquiries.
it. When you are.
Sorry, but it's, yeah.
But no, I think it's a good point. Okay, thank you very much. And safe journeys home then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.